So a mild start to the day for England and Wales, given the cloud and rain sinking south by this stage. The rain petering out, and by Wednesday morning, really, it's confined to the far south. Blustery showers, though, continue for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with some winteriness in those showers in the far north.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hi there, good afternoon. Coming up in the next 60 minutes. Is it sexist to criticise the Prime Minister's wife, or is Carrie Johnson fair game if she's pulling the levers of power and texting from the PM's phone, as is alleged? Also, from one powerful woman to two more, the Queen says Camilla should be Queen Consort when Charles is King. Who are the Diana diehards who say the announcement is an insult to the late Princess of Wales? And is it déjà vu at Downing Street? 20 years ago, the PM and Chancellor were at daggers drawn. Are Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak going the way of Blair and Brown? A Labour frontbencher joins me to discuss. And alongside me throughout today's show, the social commentator Lynn May. But first, the headlines.
Good afternoon. It's just after 4 o'clock and I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB Newsroom. Your top story today, the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has within the last hour accused the Chancellor of playing political games with public health after the NHS recovery plan was delayed. The Prime Minister, however, says Number 10 and the Treasury are working together to tackle patient waiting lists in England. At a visit to the Kent Oncology Centre at Maidstone Hospital with the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson said the NHS backlog is a government priority.
What we're doing is working together across the whole of government to fix the COVID backlogs, which, believe me, is a massive priority for us, for everybody in the country. And, no doubt about the Chancellor's absolutely not.
Boris Johnson, well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says the millions of people on a waiting list are in desperate need of a plan.
The longer this takes, the greater will be the waiting lists. And we've had people on waiting lists, not only during COVID, but before COVID we had waiting lists that were far too high. So the government saying we need more time is not going to cut very much ice with those that are on the waiting list. You know, there's a price to be paid by a government that is distracted by all these allegations that are going on. And that price is being paid by the 6 million people who are waiting for their operations.
Sir Keir Starmer. Well, the Health Secretary also said today some recent criticism of the Prime Minister's wife, Carrie Johnson, was sexist, undignified and unfair. His statement follows the publication of extracts from Lord Ashcroft's new book, which accuses Mrs Johnson of influencing her husband's decision-making. Carrie Johnson has insisted she plays no role in government and claimed she's been targeted by enemies of the Prime Minister. In international news, the French President Emmanuel Macron has met with the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, in Moscow amid rising tensions on the border with Ukraine. President Putin told Macron they have common concerns over security in Europe, and he acknowledged France is making efforts to solve that, including the crisis at the Ukraine border. Well, meanwhile, the UK government has announced it's sending 350 British troops to Poland amid continued tensions between Russia and Ukraine. They're in addition to the more than 100 Royal Engineers deployed last year to help the recent border dispute between Poland and Belarus. The Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, says they're being sent as a bilateral agreement showing Britain and Poland do stand side by side. Here, the Criminal Cases Review Commission is to examine fresh evidence in the case of mother and daughter Lynn and Megan Russell, who were murdered in Kent 26 years ago. That comes after the serial killer Levi Bellfield confessed to their murders. Our Home and Security editor Mark White has this report.
He is one of the UK's most notorious serial killers. A former nightclub bouncer, Levi Bellfield, is serving a whole life sentence for the murders of schoolgirl Millie Dowler, Marcia McDonnell and French student Amélie Delagrange. The revelation he has now confessed to the murders of mother and daughter Lynn and Megan Russell is a startling new development in that 26-year-old crime. Paul Bacon, the lawyer representing the man convicted of those killings, revealed he had now received a signed confession from Bellfield. Paul Bacon's client, Michael Stone, has always maintained his innocence, but multiple appeals have been repeatedly rejected. Bellfield is said to have revealed new information that could only have been known by the man who attacked Lynn Russell and her daughters in this quiet country lane in Kent. The new evidence will now be examined by the Criminal Cases Review Commission. Mark White, GB News.
The Children's Commissioner says there's still a long way to go on children's mental health, with only a third of young people able to access treatment. Dame Rachel de Souza says that although the average wait has decreased from 43 to 32 days, some children are still waiting too long to start treatment, and there are regional disparities on waiting lists. The number of children with mental health conditions has jumped during the pandemic to 1 in 6. The Chinese tennis player Peng Shuai says reports she accused a high-ranking Chinese official of sexual assault are a huge misunderstanding. In November, a post on her social media claimed she was forced to have sex with a former Chinese vice premier, Zhang Guoli. The post was later deleted. The former doubles world #1 has now told the French newspaper L'Équipe, "I never said anyone sexually assaulted me in any way." Peng said she'd been unaware of the global concern for her safety and she had deleted the post. You're with GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Right now, time to get more from Colin Brazier.
Hi there. Well, in the last couple of hours, our Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, has announced that the British Army will be sending 350 troops to Poland. Mr Wallace said the deployment was being made in what he described as spirit of solidarity. Well, with whom? Joining me now, Major General Chip Chapman. Chip Chapman, welcome to you. Thanks for your time. A spirit of solidarity, says Ben Wallace, but with whom?
Well, I think you have to look at this in three things that are going on at the moment. We've got diplomacy, we've got dialogue, and we've got deterrence. And if we go back to the Warsaw Summit in 2016, that is when NATO went from a posture of reassurance to deterrence. And so this does two things. Firstly, it adds to the deterrence posture. And secondly, it helps reassure Poland, who, for geopolitical reasons, any Russian incursions are deemed to be existential. It's also worth saying that we've already got those deterrence forces in terms of a tripwire, because the Enhanced Forward Presence, OPCA-Brit as the Brits call it, has battle groups, multinational battle groups in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia and Poland. So I think what this will lead to is an enhancement of the battle group, which is already in Poland, which has a British component of a couple of hundred people already.
Chip, how unusual is this in the context of the last 20 or so years, in the context of that period after the fall of the Berlin Wall and that sense in which Poland was being peeled away from the old Warsaw Pact? The idea of sending hundreds of British soldiers, I mean, it will strike many of us as unusual, perhaps unprecedented, is it?
Well, no, it's not. So this has been ongoing for 6 years. As I said, there are these 1,500 men battle groups or person battle groups in those 4 countries. And indeed, the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, General Todd Walters, in December, talked about maybe sending 2 more battle groups to Bulgaria and Romania. That is, you then have a containment line if the Russians invaded the Ukraine, which is between what they call the intermarium countries, that is between the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea.
If you are the mother, the father, the brother, the sister, perhaps the spouse of somebody who's about to be deployed to Poland, Chip Chapman, what would you as a former military man be saying to them right now? They'll be worried about the situation in Ukraine. These British soldiers aren't being sent to the Ukraine, not being sent close to the Ukraine. But what would your message be?
Well, deterrence is a strategy designed to dissuade an adversary from a step not yet taken. So this is really a step to try and dissuade Russia from doing anything else. Now, having said that, Russia is also up to coercive diplomacy. And we see this with, for example, some of their battalion groups moving from assembly areas, particularly, it seems, in Belarus. This, again, is to dial up the sort of intensity to extract concessions, and that will be on the mind of Macron when he goes there tomorrow. But we're looking at this in geopolitical terms between NATO and Ukraine and Russia, without considering that, you know, it's the sovereignty of Ukraine which is at issue. And what I would really fear is that someone doing a dirty deal which limits the sovereignty of Ukraine, and if you do that, then Putin actually gains. It's worth saying that this is Putin 4.0. He's been there in his 4th presidency, and he could be there until 2036. This could be a longer-term bite and herd strategy from Putin.
Chip Chapman, appreciate your time as ever. Thanks very much indeed. Well, just arrived by taxi. Let me introduce you to our guest on today's show. That is Lynn May, who's an outspoken social commentator who will be joining me throughout the course of the next 2 hours. Very warm welcome to you, Lynn, and thanks for being here. We'll just skip through a couple of stories of a less heavy bent to start with. I say less heavy, but actually they are in their own way very important. The first
I think even the Poland one is important.
Well, you're very welcome to throw your 2 pence in about that, but I was going to ask you about Carrie Simons.
Okay.
And this idea that it's an old trope, really, this sort of Lady Macbeth accusation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a book suggesting that she is pulling the levers of power, the Prime Minister's spouse, that she sometimes texts from his phone, that a lot of the current woes bedeviling Number 10 lie at her door. Mm-hmm. There's a counter-argument. Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, has said that's misogynistic. It's sexist to make these accusations. What say you?
I don't know why people would say that it's sexist or misogynistic, because I think the questions, they're warranted. And whether it was a male or female, the questions would still arise. And as much as, you know, a statement came from her side that she has nothing to do with the government per se, you can't really say that, because by proximity, she supported Boris Johnson in 2010. She's been incremental participation in the Conservative Party. And even down to the aides today who left was one of her best friends. So it's easy for her to say, you know, to disconnect herself from it. But OK, if we're going to go with that argument, and there was no parties, you know, in the garden of Number 10, why was she sitting there? If it was work-related, why was she right there?
Let's just consider some of the ideas that are in play. I mean, for one thing, and for Democrats like me, it will be worrisome if you've got a situation where you've got an unelected figure, whatever their role, enjoying that kind of access to our elected leader, Boris Johnson. So there's a democratic accountability question. And then also just on a practical level, the human nature dimension to all this, where if you've got a job where you live above the office, that's what happens at number 10, and you've recently remarried, you know, the nature of relationships is you tend to be with somebody who shares your interests. And we know Carrie Simons is actively engaged, has been very actively engaged in politics. It would be strange, wouldn't it, if she didn't occasionally, over a bowl of lasagna or whatever with the Prime Minister at the end of a long day's work, say, actually, Boris, maybe you should think about getting these pets out of Kabul, or you know, whatever it is, it's alleged she suggested to him that hadn't occurred to him before.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between over a bowl of lasagna and her being actually connected to key figures within the government at the moment. And that's important. But one thing I do want to state is I don't want her to be seen as a scapegoat. And I think it's important that we still place responsibility on Boris Johnson, irrespective of whether Carrie Simons is, you know, suggesting to Boris that this is happening or that's happening, or she's swaying his opinion further away from what he used to think. It still relies, the onus is on him. So I think this whole conversation that it's Carrie's fault, well, no, it's Boris's fault, because if Boris can see that she's making his role a problem, then there's an issue there.
Yeah,
we shouldn't start blaming Carrie. Like I said, the conversation now has automatically moved from, oh, you know, Boris should be held accountable. Oh, let's talk about his wife. No, let's talk about Boris. Now, if I had someone in my life that was preventing me from doing my job for whatever reason, my boss is not going to start looking at the person in my life. They're going to look at me. And that's what we should focus on. We need to focus on Boris Johnson. If he's the problem, we need to find out why and what he going to do about it instead of looking at Carrie.
Let's talk to somebody who thinks that Boris Johnson is very much the problem, particularly as regards the National Health Service right now. Then we'll come back to you in a second. Not to take your coat off, you're staying for the next 2 hours. You've rushed in. And that is the plan to tackle NHS waiting lists in England. It's been delayed, it's alleged, by the Treasury, been reported today. Let's turn straight to Andrew Gwynn, the Shadow Public Health Minister, who a few moments ago actually was just alongside Wes Streeting in the House of Commons with an urgent question about these NHS waiting lists. He's hot-footed it to a different location. Let me turn the sound down on my laptop. That's very annoying, isn't it? Andrew Gwynn, thanks ever so much for your time. Appreciated as ever. Of course, there are waiting lists. We can't go through a 2-year-long COVID pandemic and there not to have been an impact on NHS waiting lists. The question is what to do about it.
But of course, this is the first mistake. It's not a COVID backlog or solely a COVID backlog. It's a Tory backlog, because the facts are that before coronavirus hit these shores, the NHS already had a backlog of 4.5 million people on waiting lists. This has just added to that. And so what we want to see is the government's long-promised plan. They promised it in December, then they promised it for today. We had the spectacle of the Health Secretary doing a media tour of the studios this morning with nothing to unveil. Meanwhile, people are waiting, often in agony, certainly in anxiety. We've got to get a grip of our NHS. We've got to ensure that we bring those waiting times and waiting lists down. It's been done before, and we believe we can do it again.
Andrew, the waiting lists are bad. They'd be worse if we got to April the 1st and we were dispensing with the services of 75,000 NHS staff. And that was the government's previous plan. It's also a plan that your party signed up to as well, saying to people, NHS staff who'd were not willing to submit themselves to a mandatory vaccination, to sling their hooks and leave the National Health Service. Would have been in a real state then, would we not?
Well, of course, that was requested for by the NHS. And as the science showed that that wasn't necessary, I think the government made the right decision. And that's why we support the government in removing that requirement. But there is a fundamental issue here at how we overturn these huge waiting lists and the lengthy and lengthening waiting times. And without a plan, you know, the government's announced that there is more money for the NHS, specifically for bringing the waiting list down. But without a plan to say how they're doing it, there is a real worry that the NHS will just swallow up that money without actually seeing any real benefit. So that's why we really do need both this elective surgery plan, but also workforce plans, so that for the long term, we can then ensure that the NHS both has the ability to tackle these backlogs and future crises that may hit the organisation in the future, but also that we've got the workforce and the work planning in place to be able to get on top of the mountainous problems that are now facing the NHS. And that's why we're getting frustrated, because what we're seeing is that the NHS is almost in this political game. We were told that this was ready to be launched today. The Health Secretary, as I say, was doing a tour of the studios to promote it. And then at the last minute, it seems that the Treasury have put a block on this. I really hope the NHS isn't being used as some kind of political pawn between the incumbents of number 10 and number 11 Downing Street.
Well, there's nothing new about number 11 and number 10 falling out, is there? I'm going to remember that under New Labour, apart from anything else. Andrew Gwynn, appreciate your time. Thanks a lot. Protests against Canada's vaccine mandates have expanded beyond the capital, Ottawa, disrupting traffic in cities from Vancouver to Quebec City. In Ottawa, hundreds of trucks remain downtown in what one police chief described as a siege. The organisers had raised more than $10 million on the website GoFundMe. The website said the money would be seized and handed to charities of their choosing after the Canadian government claimed the protesters were dangerous. GoFundMe subsequently backtracked rather quickly and promised to return the money. But should it ever be up to big tech firms in California or elsewhere to work with government and decide what protest groups get funding or don't get funding? Joining me now, Will Chamberlain, the lawyer, journalist and senior counsel to the Internet Accountability Project. A very warm welcome to you. I have to say, when I read at the weekend what was happening to GoFundMe, this crowdfunding website, I can hear some noises off just alongside me from my co-presenter today. I was stunned, Will. The idea that $10 million could be raised not just from Canada, around the world, from people who wanted to support these truckers, and then GoFundMe, briefly at least, they did change their mind, could say actually they're not getting the money, others are. Will Chamberlain, we've got a few audio problems. We're going to try and fix that. And it gives Lynn May an opportunity to actually do more than cheer up from the sidelines. I think you're agreeing with the point I was making, which was fairly astonishing.
Yeah, I just think it's horrific. And if we go back to Black Lives Matter as an organisation, there was no question of where that money should go. And now if we look at Black Lives Matter in the US, Canada and in the UK, there's still so many questions as to where that money has gone. So on one hand, we have this organisation which completely went unchecked financially, but then the truckers, they're taking that money.
Hold that thought, Lynn. We've got the audio problem sorted with Will Chamberlain. Let's go back to him. We'll, I'm sure, get onto the Black Lives Matter question in just a second. But Will, just on the point about GoFundMe and the truckers in Canada, what did you make of it?
I mean, I think it's appalling. First off, obviously they backtracked the moment they started talking to their lawyers and realized they were facing serious state-level investigations. I mean, even if they didn't commit outright fraud, because somewhere in their terms of service they were allowed to do this, this is certainly a deceptive or misleading trade practice, and there are state laws against that here. So they were likely facing investigations by multiple states if they didn't backtrack and refund these donations. But, you know, as a general matter, I think these platforms should only be, you know, following basic like terrorism laws. Obviously, there are laws that prohibit them from funding terrorist groups, but the idea that they would suddenly be, you know, having the discretion to shut off money to a domestic protest, and especially if they don't do that on a consistent basis, is appalling, and they should absolutely just stay out of it.
Do you think, Will, I mean, this is such a prosaic point, but it's one of those things that I think is often overlooked, that this happened at the weekend, I think, and very often, you know, the senior executives, the grown-ups, are off doing what they're doing at the weekend, and a fairly junior official makes a decision or sends the tweet or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been that. It could have been just rushed without going through legal counsel. Like, I mean, I'm serious. A lawyer would have looked at this plan and said, no. Like, you do that, we need to absolutely refund donations because, you know, there are so many different legal risks. There's the general risk of a state attorney general launching investigation. There's the risk of a mass revolt where you have all these individual people file claims, and under certain state laws, the company has to pay for the arbitration for every single individualized claim. So, all sorts of problems would happen.
Well, there's a bigger, I suppose, more obvious commercial hazard, which is people will just send their donations to an alternative crowdfunding source.
Yeah, and they already are doing that. I think Give, Send, Go, the Christian crowdfunding source, they've already raised $2 million for the truckers in a matter of days. So clearly there is a demand, just not just in Canada, but around the world to see that these truckers' voices are respected. And compared to the violence that we saw 2 years ago during the Black Lives Matter protest, this is indeed a very, very peaceful protest.
Yeah, it feels like one rule for one rule for the other, doesn't it? Will Chamberlain, thanks very much indeed. We'll come back to that story a little later on, but for now, thanks very much indeed. You're with Colin Brazier on GB News, on TV and on radio. After the break, a man has confessed to killing Millie Dowler, and we'll bring you the very latest on that. But first, a look at the weather.
Hello again. Cloudy skies overnight will bring outbreaks of rain to Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, and act as a blanket for much of the country, particularly in the south, where it will be a mild night. A few cloud breaks are possible for central and southern parts of the UK, but even here, enough of a breeze to keep things stirred up and mild. Heavy rain pushes south across Scotland, arriving into southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England by dawn. 7 to 10 Celsius for much of England, Wales, central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, but for the north of Scotland, 2 to 5 Celsius. Colder here because the front has moved south, and colder, brighter weather follows for Central Belt northwards. And really through Tuesday, we're going to see further blustery showers for much of northern and western Scotland, those showers falling as snow above 300 or 400 metres. But for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England, it stays cloudy with some light outbreaks of rain on and off throughout the day. Further south again, dry with even some sunshine for the Midlands, East Anglia, southern counties of England, South Wales, 12 to 14 Celsius in places here. Staying breezy and cloudy across much of England and Wales overnight, then into the start of Wednesday. And as a result, it's going to be mild. Outbreaks of rain pushing through Wales into the Midlands. And to the north, well, clearer spells for northern England, for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but further blustery showers. And as we go through Wednesday, we're going to drag cold air in across the northern half of the UK from the west-northwest. The snow line then starts to sink lower, and as a result, we're even going to see some sleet and snow showers to low levels across the north of Scotland, but certainly snow accumulating over the West Highlands above 200 metres throughout Wednesday itself. Cloud and rain sinks south across England and Wales, with sunny spells following, and the rain tends to peter out by the afternoon as well. 12 Celsius in the south, feeling cold in the wind further north.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I've got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts who really know their stuff. We can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
I think it was a mistake.
Even you, Liam, don't have a crystal ball.
Inflation's a real threat. Every weekday at 1, you're On the Money.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, the murderer of Millie Dowler, Levi Bellfield, has reportedly admitted to killing a mother and her 6-year-old daughter in 1996. A lawyer representing Michael Stone, who is serving life for the murder of Lynn and Megan Russell, says he's received a letter from Bellfield detailing his involvement. Well, our Home and Security editor, Mark White's alongside me. It's a complicated story, this, Mark, and horrific in its detail when we think back to what happened. Can we trust someone as utterly untrustworthy, I was on the point of saying evil, but that's for others to decide, as Levi Bellfield?
I think a healthy dose of scepticism is required here. There are immediate alarm bells that ring, especially with a serial killer. This guy is never getting out. He was jailed for 2 whole life tariffs for the murders of, as you mentioned, Marcia McDonnell, also Amélie Delagrange and Millie Dowler as well, and the attempted murder of Kate Sheedy. He ain't getting out. So what is in it for him? Potential notoriety. These people also, like to mess with the authorities. The police and the prosecution services, they know that this will cause them immense pain and embarrassment if they are found to have been involved in the wrongful conviction of an individual who spent 25 years in jail. And also, there is the potential thrill for this man of putting someone back on the streets that he believes may well have been responsible for the murders of Lynn and Megan. So there's lots at play here. It doesn't mean that he's not genuine, that there isn't remorse there, but I think we've just got to be sceptical.
I mean, during the commercial break, Lynn was speculating, is he in his prison cell watching or listening to radio bulletins, glorying in what he's done?
Well, I think it is certainly very possible that he is. We know that prisoners are given radios and televisions and laptops and alike. It depends what the level of security he is under. But I think it's pretty likely that he's got contact with the outside world in the forms of this kind of technology. He says in this 4-page letter that he's written to a solicitor called Paul Bacon, who is the solicitor for Michael Stone, the man who was convicted of murdering Lynn and Megan Russell. He has said that he wasn't right in the head at the time. He's since undergone treatment and he's now remorseful. He's apologised in this letter to the family of Lynn and Megan and also to Michael Stone. You take that at face value, which I'm sure the Criminal Cases Review Commission will to an extent, but it won't be their only piece of evidence. It can't be. They've got to weigh up all of the evidence in the round. We know that the case has raised some concerns over the years. Michael Stone has always vehemently denied that he was involved in the murder. Again, that's not unusual. We get criminals who, even after conviction, the majority of them will swear blind that they were innocent, Gov. So he has never wavered from that, though. His solicitor and his sister have fought a multi-decade campaign to try to have that overturned. They got the original conviction quashed, and there was a retrial at the Old Bailey in which, again, he was convicted of that. He's tried at the Criminal Cases Review Council to have that reinvestigated. It hasn't happened, but yeah, there's all kinds of interesting evidence and subplots to this as well.
Yeah, and I just keep coming back to that image from the mid-1990s of Lynn and Megan Russell just out in the Kent countryside, weren't they, exercising a pony. That idea of just somewhere as bucolic and as beautiful and as peaceful, into that world came this hideous act and murder. I mean, it's just unthinkable, isn't it?
Yeah, he says in this letter, apparently, that it wasn't his intention on that day to harm the two girls, that he got carried away because of the power he was able to exert over the mother that didn't want to do anything to see her children harmed. And he describes in the letter, and this is something I think that the Criminal Cases Review Council, a commission, will take into account, and the police investigating the original case, of course. What he was wearing, his method of escape, and the way he acted on that day. Now, that's the kind of thing that might ring some kind of memories, or stir some kind of memories in Josie Russell, who was the 9-year-old sister of Megan Russell, who survived. She had been very badly injured when she was attacked with a claw hammer, had to learn to talk again. I don't know how much of the original event she will remember, but it's possible that key issues like this that maybe were only ever known to the killer.
She's managed to rebuild her life. It'd be a shame to start revisiting all this.
Well, it's going to do that, isn't it?
Mark, for now, thanks very much indeed. Mark White there. Next up, we've got more on the Winter Olympics are underway, and the authoritarian tendencies of the Chinese regime are well and truly under the spotlight. But first, Polly has the latest news headlines.
Colin, thank you. It's just after 4:30, the top stories. The Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has been accusing the Chancellor of playing political games with public health after the NHS recovery plan was delayed. The Prime Minister, however, says Number 10 and the Treasury are working together to tackle patient waiting lists in England. At a visit to the Kent Oncology Centre at Maidstone Hospital with the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson said the NHS backlog is a government priority. The Health Secretary also said recent criticism of the Prime Minister's wife, Carrie Johnson, was sexist, undignified and unfair. His statement follows the publication of extracts from Lord Ashcroft's new book, which accuses Mrs Johnson of influencing her husband's decision-making. Carrie Johnson has insisted she played no role in government and has simply been targeted by enemies of the Prime Minister in a brutal briefing campaign. The UK is sending an extra 350 soldiers to Poland amid continued tensions between Russia and Ukraine. They're being deployed on top of more than 100 Royal Engineers sent last year to help in the recent border dispute between Poland and Belarus. The Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, said it's to show Britain and Poland stand side by side. And the capital of Canada has declared a state of emergency due to ongoing demonstrations against vaccine mandates that's been led by truckers. They call themselves the Freedom Convoy, and they've paralysed parts of the city for several days, with some saying they want to dissolve Canada's government. And the Children's Commissioner here says there's still a long way to go on children's mental health, with only a third of young people able to access treatment. Dame Rachel D'Souza says some children are waiting too long to start treatment, and there are regional disparities on waiting lists. On TV, on your radio, via DAB+, and online, you're with GB News. We'll have more from Brazier after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Warm welcome back. You're with Colin Brazier on GB News on TV and on radio. Online, we have a poll. Today's question, should Camilla become Queen? This in light of what Her Majesty had to say about Camilla becoming Queen Consort when Charles becomes King. It's interesting. I think it's interesting. Lynn May is alongside me to reflect on how interesting or otherwise, or how telling it is. 2/3 of our respondents are saying, yes, of course she should be Queen, which actually is about the support for the monarchy, interestingly. That's a sort of figure. What do you make of it?
How will it benefit? I guess it looks good in terms of, from a tourist perspective, you know, king and queen, and it would really...
benefit him.
Yeah, it would.
He's
but
the future head of state.
I think a lot of people still have a fixation on Diana. And I think when it comes to adultery, even though we don't really adhere to a lot of the Christian principles or religious principles in this country anymore, there is something to be said for where do we draw the line with morality. And the same goes for Carrie Symonds, not to go back on that topic, but it's like, you know, are we now accepting of possible adultery at the top echelons of society?
But he's not. I mean, if and when Charles becomes king, he will become Supreme Governor of the Church of England. But the established Church of England doesn't really care that much anymore about adultery. So why should he? And it was a long time ago. It was over 20 years ago. I'm surprised that, you know, we're different generations. I was working the overnight shift at Sky when the news came through there'd been a crash in Paris. I went to Paris and saw the reaction then. But your generation, it's something you've read about I'm not being funny, but you didn't live through it in the same way, did you? And yet you still feel.
When you look at some of the interviews with Diana and how upset she was with the marriage, and of course, you're not just going to blame one person for it. However, I do think a lot of people, especially the ones who support Diana, do believe that Camilla wheedled her way in, even though there was some romance while he was with Diana. And that's why people may have an issue with it. But my thing personally is more about, what does it do? We have Queen Elizabeth and her late husband, which was Prince, and that was fine. Why does now Camilla have to be Queen?
Because it's Queen Elizabeth's decision. It's her wish. And if nothing else, we honour her wish, don't we? If we honour her and we...
I would love to know how she came about that, though. Is it to make her son happy, probably?
We can't let light in upon the magic in upon the light, or whatever that phrase, light on the magic.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point, isn't it? This is an institution that's not democratic. I'm a great fan of the institution. I think it's useful within our constitutional settlement. But the moment you let... You know, you can't treat it like the Houses of Parliament. These decisions arrive at within a family context, and they stay secret. We just have to live with that.
I don't know, I just think there's some inconsistencies as well. I'm not a fan of Meghan Markle. However, a lot of the people that didn't really like Meghan for Harry was saying, you know, she's a divorcee, she's this, she's that. But now Camilla should be Queen, where she relates to a lot of those same things that people were very critical of Meghan for.
I think the people who are critical of Meghan, I include myself, don't give a toss whether she's a divorcee or not. It's how she behaves. And
it was definitely used. People said, you know, she should never be, marrying Harry as a divorcee.
I'm sure it was said.
Same for Camilla.
Our poll is still open. Do vote. Let us know your opinions. Lynn, thanks very much indeed. We'll come back to you on the next story very shortly. And that is the Winter Olympics. They are properly underway, and the authoritarian tendencies of the Chinese communist regime seem to be under the spotlight. The UK, US, other nations too, diplomatically boycotting the event. Visiting journalists have been told to bring temporary phones, as well as exercising extreme caution so their data isn't stolen. Meanwhile, China's President Xi Jinping used a meeting at the Olympics with the Argentinian president to back Argentina's claims over the Falklands Island. Our Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has been hitting back, insisting the Falklands are part of the, quote, British family. So should the Games have gone ahead in a nation accused of genocide? And what dangers are presented by China being able to use the Olympics as a shop window in the way that they are and will? Joined by Austin Williams, author of China's Urban Revolution. Austin, thanks ever so much for joining us. It's happening. They're putting it on. They'll do a good job.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, you have to say that there's a regular complaint every Olympics. I look forward to those 6 months before the Olympics where the Western press says, will they ever get them built? Look at the state of the accommodation for the competitors. In this sense, you wouldn't say that about China because everybody knew they'd get it built on time because it's China. But, you know, there's been a different swathe of complaints. Who was it? The Swedish team has complained that it's too cold in the Winter Olympics. I let you know. The German team
try the
has
studio,
complained
Austin. They should try the studio. Then they'll know cold.
Well, yeah, exactly. Same here. That's why I got my jumper on. But it's it's the Winter Olympics, for goodness sake, and it's Sweden. So I don't know what they were expecting. Germany say that there's not enough hot food. I mean, if there's one thing you wouldn't say about China is the absence of hot food. Even if you have to just add boiling water to a pot noodle, there's a million and one hot foods to be had. So there just seems to be a kind of a rather pathetic level of complaints. Then there's the broader stuff about journalists being moved to one side by overzealous security men and all the rest of it. But generally, I'm one of those great believers, which Beijing has pushed again this time, but every Olympics says it, that we really should maybe keep politics out of a sporting event because there is some brilliant stuff to be seen. Not obviously in the snowboarding, but more broadly, there's some great events.
I just wonder, you mentioned, I think it was a Dutch journalist who was filming a piece to camera or doing a live broadcast, and a policeman moved him to on one side. It got a lot of play, went a little bit viral. And people look at things like that and they bear in mind that I think when it comes to press freedom on the index, the global index, China's, I think, 177 out of 180 countries. Maybe there's a counter-argument, Austin. Maybe actually the experience of hosting hundreds of foreign journalists and watching how they work, watching how they go about their business, might in a very localised sense, open the eyes of some Chinese officials in a good way.
Yeah, well, I used to work for a very small media company way back when, maybe 15 years ago, and I got moved off from Elephant and Castle for filming in South London. So, you know, there's horses for courses here. And maybe just one example is not representative of a broader swathe, because actually I've also been filming in China. Because I'm Western, let's be frank, I tend to get better treated than if I was maybe a Uyghur filming in China. But you see the point that sometimes you can just see one soundbite on YouTube and magnify that into a broader problem. But I completely agree with you that my involvement in China, which was I was teaching in China for a long time, was precisely that I thought if you're going to try to complain about a country's authoritarian regime, one of the ways of doing it is maybe take some useful educational standards, open people's eyes to creative thinking and all the rest of it. Sadly, most of the Western people going back to China have got no idea about critical thinking or the notion of what education could be about, because they are now steeped in Western censorship, making China look almost libertarian by comparison. So there's a very strange kind of regime going on. But I do agree with you. I think we should be possibly more involved in China, or at least more appreciative of some of the. At least look at it with a bit more nuance than we tend to do. It's a very black and white story at the moment.
Austin Williams, appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Lynn May's alongside me reflecting on the Winter Olympics. Going to be watching?
Not really, but I don't understand this whole, trying to challenge or attack China for the way that how they live. I don't agree.
China, it's the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, the Chinese Communist Party. I think for the simple fact that our imports have increased by 11 billion, we don't have a leg to stand on to criticise some of their regime. They know that we're hugely reliant on them, so they're going to behave unchecked. They're not going to do anything.
There was a golden age of Anglo-Sino relations announced by David Cameron over 10 years ago, and it takes a while to unpick that. If you've signed massive multi-million pound deals to develop a nuclear power station, for instance, or you've invited Huawei in to be part of your 5G network in a very, very infrastructurally important way, it takes time to unravel all that stuff. I'm just saying. Lynn, thanks very much indeed. Let us know what you think of this story, because it's one I think that will get you gander, many of you. A studio flat. It's smaller than the average parking space. Is going up for auction next week. Bids start at £50,000 into the seven square metre property on the first floor of a house in East London. It's crammed a bed with a microwave beneath it and a separate toilets and can shower. Oh yes. A reminder of how if you can get on the housing ladder in Britain's big cities at all, it is often a lot of money for not very much housing. And as we consider that property, we're also pondering on the words of Kirsty Allsop, who provoked some comment by suggesting that it was possible for young buyers to buy a home provided they were willing to forego luxuries like expensive coffee and Netflix subscriptions. Well, the broadcaster and property expert Martin Roberts is with us now. Martin, very warm welcome to you. Was it the way I read that introduction, or is it what Kirsty said that's got you a tittering?
No, well, both, mate. I love the fact you said give a toss as well. I think it's so refreshing to hear that expression on TV. I just love Kirsty. She's brilliant. She just put her foot in it slightly, and I think it's not the criticism she's getting is interesting. I can understand completely why people have reacted the way they have. I think some of what she said made a lot of sense. I think the slight thing about, Netflix and cups of coffee, I think somebody quite pointedly at the end of a particular interview I read pointed out that it would actually take, if you gave up your foreign holiday, your Netflix, your frothy coffee and your gym membership, it would take 37 years to save up for a house. But I think what I'm really all about is trying to, a bit like Kirsty, I suppose, get people to think slightly outside the box. And it is horrendous for young people trying to get on that housing market. First-time buyers, as we see prices escalate beyond, our wildest dreams, they go up, they keep on going up. I mean, it's a story that's been repeated over the years, and I'm sure, you will recognise. But I think it's about finding ways that you can actually do it and not losing hope. And, one of the thoughts is, that 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom box in the East End of London or wherever it is, may not be the most sensible thing to buy if you're looking to just get started. And rather than maybe giving up your Netflix and your Starbucks Frappuccino, maybe we think about buying a property, not necessarily where we want to live, but use it as a route to generating, what is a significant amount of deposit now. So say, for instance, as an example, you might buy a house, 60 grand, 70 grand, you can still get those in various parts of the country. And you as a first-time buyer, one of the things you might have is time, energy, enthusiasm, and the ability to maybe do up that property. So, you do some simple work on it, you decorate it, you maybe put in a new kitchen, you do stuff that's possible, you add value to that property. And let's say you spend 10 grand on it, and these aren't unrealistic numbers. You then got 70 grand that you've invested in that property. You might be able to sell that for 95, 100 grand. And suddenly you've got yourself a 25, 30,000 pound pot of money that would have taken a lot of Netflix giving up.
It would. Of course, by which time you're planning on flipping that property, it turns out the property market's gone south and you can't get 100,000, you can't get 80,000.
Mr. Doommonger, listen to you.
Well, no, I say this, Martin, this is such an important issue, isn't it? And, I've got... how many kids? 6 kids. I'm getting worse than Boris Johnson. And the older ones. No, don't say anything rude. The older ones.
Sperm count. That's not.
The older ones, Martin. The older ones. I do worry. I mean, I'm thinking, how on earth? I mean, when it's 9 times average earnings now. Yeah. To get the average house. This is way beyond their reach. And unless you've got pots of money in the bank of mum and dad, it's not happening. And that means lots of other things aren't happening, starting a family. And the idea, I know what you're saying about the 60 grand thing, but if you live where the work is very often, near our big cities, you're not going to find a house for £60,000.
Can I just ask?
Oh, no. Yeah, well, actually, Martin, hang on. Lynn May's got a question. Yeah, go on.
For those who don't know, can you tell us why, in your view, the property prices keep on increasing? I know one of the issues are foreign investment. Do you think that the government needs to do more with regards to that? Because as we're such an attractive city in London, it invites all of the foreign investment and it prices out a lot of young people from being able to purchase those properties. So what more can be done, and why are those prices increasing so much?
Yeah, I think you bring an interesting point in terms of some of the big cities, especially London. That's where foreign investment, but they tend to go for the sort of trophy areas. They're not going to be buying in Bradford. They're not going to be buying in Bromsgrove. They're not going to be buying necessarily in Reading or wherever. And those aren't bad places. They're just not necessarily on the radar of people who are abroad. I think what's driven the prices is demand. I mean, it is a commodity, and whenever you have a shortage of supply and an increase in demand, and what we saw through lockdown is lots of people doing the thing that they've been trying to do for ages, and they've decided they're actually going to do it now because it sort of freaks us all out a bit about how quickly life can change. So there's an attitude of let me live my dreams if I can. So a lot of moving out into the countryside, and just that lack of supply. And I think you've got to look at where the government have got to in their commitment to supply housing, and that's been a long line of failure, basically.
Martin, so much to talk about. Maybe we'll get the chance to do it again soon, but really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thanks ever so much. Martin Roberts there. Just time now for a look at the weather.
Hello again. Cloudy skies overnight will bring outbreaks of rain to Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, and act as a blanket for much of the country, particularly in the south, where it will be a mild night. A few cloud breaks are possible for central and southern parts of the UK, but even here, enough of a breeze to keep things stirred up and mild. Heavy rain pushes south across Scotland, arriving into southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England by dawn. 7 to 10 Celsius for much of England, Wales, central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, but for the north of Scotland, 2 to 5 Celsius. Colder here because the front has moved south, and colder, brighter weather follows for central belt northwards. And really through Tuesday, we're going to see further blustery showers for much of northern and western Scotland, those showers falling as snow above 300 or 400 metres. But for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England, it stays cloudy with some light outbreaks of rain on and off throughout the day. Further south again, dry with even some sunshine for the Midlands, East Anglia, southern counties of England, South Wales, 12 to 14 Celsius in places here. Staying breezy and cloudy across much of England and Wales overnight, then into the start of Wednesday. And as a result, it's going to be mild. Outbreaks of rain pushing through Wales into the Midlands. And to the north, well, clearer spells for northern England, for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but further blustery showers. And as we go through Wednesday, we're going to drag cold air in across the northern half of the UK from the west-northwest. The snow line then starts to sink lower, and as a result, we're even going to see some sleet and snow showers to low levels across the north of Scotland, but certainly snow accumulating over the West Highlands above 200 metres throughout Wednesday itself. Cloud and rain sinks south across England and Wales, with sunny spells following, and the rain tends to peter out by the afternoon as well. 12 Celsius in the south, feeling cold in the wind further north.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Scientists are said to be on the cusp of the biggest ever breakthrough in the treatment of pancreatic cancer. Survival rates for pancreatic cancer have barely improved in the last 50 years. It has the worst prognosis of any common cancer. UK researchers have developed a two-in-one treatment that could dramatically improve rates of survival. Let's turn to Dr. Ethan Smallwood, who can give us a perspective on this. Doctor, thanks so much for your time. It's almost become a byword, hasn't it, pancreatic cancer, for those diagnosed with it, for, frankly, limited life expectancy thereafter?
Yeah, it's a really devastating cancer, unfortunately. I mean, usually as doctors, we tend to look at the survival rate of the 1 years and 5 years. And so, you know, even just over at the 1 year interval, only 25% of patients tend to survive. And then as we go to 5 years, this goes to the single digits. So it really is hopefully good news that could come off of this research.
Why is pancreatic cancer such a killer? Is it harder to detect in the first place, harder to treat when you found it? What is it?
I think it's both. So if we look at the symptoms that patients present with pancreatic cancer, they're often quite general, non-specific. So it could be just things like back pain, tummy pain, changes to bowel habits. And of course, these are all symptoms that a lot of us will have, you know, within each kind of given year or month. So that's one thing. And then when it actually comes to treatment, we do have avenues of treatment, so surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and then also the two treatments that we can speak about in a little bit. But often the pancreatic cancer is just so far advanced that the treatment just can't do enough right now.
Yeah, and I don't think we use the word cure in that introduction to this story, because we're never really talking about cures, are we? We're talking about a spectrum of improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there will be a few cases where we can cure pancreatic cancer. I mean, anecdotally, it might more, though, actually be in the case where we might just incidentally pick up a pancreatic cancer on a scan for something else, and that it might not just be very advanced at all, so that we could cure it. But when it actually comes to most patients with pancreatic cancer, it usually isn't curative, and even curative surgery is quite rare in that case.
Dr. Smallwood, appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. Welcome to Brazier. Coming up live at 5, one of Britain's leading scientists says the French president caused thousands of deaths by denigrating Britain's vaccine. A former MEP explains why Macron is a hazard to public health. Also, as Britain this afternoon announces the deployment of 350 troops to Poland, why is an American ice cream maker urging Western forces to back off? And our debate this hour, should Camilla be Queen? It's that pithy, that simple. And who are the die-hard fans of Princess Diana who won't let her memory die without a fight? With me throughout the show, the social commentator Lynn May. But first, the headlines with Polly.
Very good afternoon, just after 5 o'clock. I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom. The Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has been accusing the Chancellor of playing political games with public health after the NHS recovery plan was delayed. The Prime Minister, however, says Number 10 and the Treasury are working together to tackle patient waiting lists in England. At a visit to the Kent Oncology Centre at Maidstone Hospital with the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson said the NHS backlog is a government priority.
What we're doing is working together across the whole of government to fix the COVID backlogs, which, believe me, is a massive priority for us, for everybody in the country. And,
no doubt about the Chancellor's
absolutely not.
Boris Johnson. Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said the millions of people on waiting lists are now desperately in need of a plan.
The longer this takes, the greater will be the waiting lists. And we've had people on waiting lists, not only during COVID, but before COVID, we had waiting lists that were far too high. So the government saying we need more time is not going to cut very much ice with those that are on the waiting list. You know, there's a price to be paid by a government that is distracted by all these allegations that are going on. And that price is being paid by the 6 million people who are waiting for their operations.
Sir Keir Starmer. Well, the Health Secretary today said some recent criticism of the Prime Minister's wife, Carrie Johnson, was both sexist, undignified and unfair. His statement follows the publication of extracts from Lord Ashcroft's new book, which accuses Mrs Johnson of influencing her husband's decision-making. Carrie Johnson has insisted she plays no role in government and claims she's been targeted by enemies of the Prime Minister. In international news, the French President Emmanuel Macron has met with the Russian President Vladimir Putin amid rising tensions between Russia and Ukraine. During talks in Moscow, Macron told Putin that Europe and Russia needed to find a new way to end the standoff over Ukraine. He said a useful response is needed, which allows war to be avoided and trust and stability to be built. Russia currently has more than 100,000 troops massed on Ukraine's border. Meanwhile, the UK government has announced it's sending 350 British soldiers to Poland amid continued tensions between Russia and Ukraine. They're in addition to the more than 100 Royal Engineers deployed last year to help in the recent border dispute between Poland and Belarus. The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says they're being sent as a bilateral agreement to show Britain and Poland stand side by side. Here, the Criminal Cases Review Commission is to examine fresh evidence in the case of the mother and daughter Lynn and Megan Russell, who were murdered in Kent 26 years ago. It comes after the serial killer Levi Bellfield confessed to their murders. Our Home and Security editor Mark White has this.
He is one of the UK's most notorious serial killers. A former nightclub bouncer, Levi Bellfield, is serving a whole life sentence for the murders of schoolgirl Millie Dowler, Marcia McDonnell and French student Amélie Delagrange. The revelation he has now confessed to the murders of mother and daughter Lynn and Megan Russell is a startling new development in that 26-year-old crime. Paul Bacon, the lawyer representing the man convicted of those killings, revealed he had now received a signed confession from Bellfield. Paul Bacon's client, Michael Stone, has always maintained his innocence, but multiple appeals have been repeatedly rejected. Bellfield is said to have revealed new information that could only have been known by the man who attacked Lynn Russell and her daughters in this quiet country lane in Kent. The new evidence will now be examined by the Criminal Cases Review Commission. Mark White, GB News.
The Children's Commissioner says there's still a long way to go on children's mental health, with only a third of young people able to access treatment. Dame Rachel de Souza says some children are waiting too long to start treatment and there are regional disparities on waiting lists. The number of children with mental health conditions has jumped during the 2020 pandemic to 1 in 6. That's up from 1 in 9 in 2017. And lastly, a number of gun salutes have been fired across the country today to mark Her Majesty the Queen's record 70-year reign. The Honourable Artillery Company fired 62 rounds at the Tower of London to celebrate the monarch's Platinum Jubilee. There were also gun salutes at London's Green Park and at Edinburgh Castle. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Now let's get more from Colin Brazier.
Well, in the last couple of hours, our Defence Secretary has announced that the British Army will be sending 350 troops to Poland. Ben Wallace said the deployment was being made in a spirit of solidarity. That was the language he used. Our security editor, Mark White, is alongside me, as is Lynn May as well, who may have something to say about this story as well. We'll find out. Mark, what do you know?
Well, we had been expecting, I think, for some time that there would be an increase in troops sent to the region, not to Ukraine proper, but to bolster and really sort of, as far as Poland is concerned, show this message of solidarity. That's certainly what Ben Wallace said today, alongside his Polish counterpart, as he announced these 350 additional troops. Now, this is on top of 100 Royal Engineers who were sent. You remember we were talking about this just a few months ago when Poland had its issues with Belarus on the border there and the concerns that they were pushing migrants over the border there. These Royal Engineers went out to help bolster their border fence in that area. Well, now it's an additional 350, not to do that, but to send this very clear message, they hope, to the Russians that, look, we stand full square with our Polish allies here at this difficult time.
Just during the bulletin, I mean, Lynn, you were making the point that it's 350 soldiers. What does that
It's so performative. What is 350 soldiers versus 100,000 of Russian troops there at the border in Ukraine? And I understand, you know, we're not deploying them to Ukraine, we're deploying them to Poland, which is fulfilling our obligation to NATO. But Putin being Putin, he's going to look at that and laugh. 350, it's nothing really.
Yeah, and but I think you have to take it in terms of, you know, this is a NATO country, one of a number of NATO countries who are providing troops all along Europe's eastern flank. And in terms of Ukraine proper, I mean, there are 100, again, a very small number, but 100 British troops in Ukraine because they're actually teaching them how to use these shoulder-launched missiles, these anti-tank missiles that they've given them, should the worst happen, to be prepared for any potential conflict. But is there really going to be conflict? I'm not so sure.
These anti-tank guns, weapons called defensive weapons, which is an odd way to describe something that would eviscerate the crew inside a tank, isn't it? Mark, thanks very much indeed. Private car parks will have to display prices more clearly, introduce a fairer system for appeals and give drivers a grace period for lateness as part of a government crackdown on fines. Most fines in England, Scotland and Wales will be capped at £50, down from £100 currently, although higher fines will remain for more serious breaches. Operators that do not follow the rules could be barred from collecting fines from motorists, the government said. The AA called the plans, quote, much needed. Let's turn to the car dealer and broadcaster Danny Kelly, who joins me now. Hi to you, Danny. I remember seeing, putting my voice to a documentary some years ago about there was secret squirrel footage, hidden camera footage showing a particularly unscrupulous private car park operator, unbelievable fines on the flimsiest of evidence. You can see why people really, I was going to use the word hate, it's probably not too strong, hate the way some of these characters operate.
Yeah, hate's a powerful word, isn't it? And I can understand, Colin, why some people do loathe car park operators. There's a boozer just 200 yards from where I'm speaking to you from, Colin, that hasn't opened since lockdown. So they've been closed for a year and 3/4. And they have a camera there that if you go into the pub, you give your reg number to someone behind the bar. If you don't, then you get hit with a £100 fine. Now, the car park is still open, but the pub is closed. It's also next to a McDonald's, so people go to the drive-through, and when they can't actually park and eat their burger at the Mackie D's, they just literally drive 20 feet to their left. And then 10 days later, they're hit with a £100 fine. When I talk to my customers, Colin, the things that really annoy them are the price of fuel, the price of road insurance, the price of car tax, and also the price to park. Not necessarily parking on private land, but just to park, for example, if you want to go shopping in the town centre. I think this is a real shot in the arm. So the government are saying that it's going to be from £100 maximum fine to £50 fine, and also you're going to have 14 days. If you pay within 14 days, Cole, it actually is reduced by 50%. So that 50 nicker could in effect be reduced to 25%. I'll just read you, if I may, Colin.
Yeah.
I won't name the boozer for obvious reasons, because I don't want my house firebombed. Another person hit with a £100 fine. I was literally there for 5 minutes. Car park ran by gangsters. Beware. And Colin, what they've also done, they've actually put a yellow public clothes donation bin in their car park. It's so clever, actually. This could be the Gambino mob in New York, racketeering. And what they do, people, kind-hearted, benevolent people, go with their old clothes, put them in the yellow recycling for people who need clothing, and then they're hit with another £100 fine. This is what the governments are trying to clamp down on. I'm not for 1 second saying, Colin, that you should be able to park on other people's land for nothing. I'm not saying that, but I think 50 nick is fair.
Yeah. Danny, really good to talk to you. You can DM me on Twitter and tell me the name of that pub. It'd be interesting to know. Danny, thanks a lot. Then May's alongside me. You were gasping during the course of that.
Yeah, I think everyone should be behind this, especially as we always talk about the high street struggling. I myself want to support the high street, but if I have to pay in excess of £10 to go to the high street to park, I may as well do some shopping online.
At one point, though, there are circumstances clearly when people have a right to stop anybody willy-nilly parking where they like, right?
Yeah, but it's far too expensive, and I think I welcome this reduction to £50 because it's not fair, and as we know, cause to effect, we want the economy to pick up, and the high street need that help and support, and if you're making it so expensive to those towns and London in general or those other cities, then why should anyone go to the high street and support it and try and pump that money into the economy?
Or indeed, as Danny was saying, go and drop off clothes to a charity.
Oh, that is disgusting, that.
More on that story if we can find out more. Lynn, for now, thanks very much indeed. Here's a story that's generated a lot of interest on our website. Let's share it with you again. It's one we visited a while ago. We're revisiting it today. Protests against Canada's vaccine mandates and strict restrictions have expanded beyond the capital, Ottawa, disrupting traffic in cities from Vancouver to Quebec City. In Ottawa, hundreds of trucks, they remain in the downtown area in what the Ottawa police chief described as a siege. The protesters had raised more than $10 million on the website GoFundMe. The website subsequently said the money would be seized and handed over to charities of their choosing after the Canadian government claimed the protesters were dangerous. Well, GoFundMe, as you probably now know, subsequently backtracked with some rapidity, promising to return the money. Should it ever be up to big tech firms in California and elsewhere to work with government and decide what protest groups get funding? The Canadian journalist Andrew Lawton joins me again. Andrew, welcome to you. Before we get into how big tech and crowdfunding works or doesn't work in the case of GoFundMe, I think we can agree on that. What is the situation now in Ottawa? How many people are there? How long do we think they're likely to stay there?
The how long question is the question no one has the answer to. We do know there are still hundreds of trucks and even more people, but the Ottawa police starting this weekend have taken a dramatically different approach. They've started to seize thousands of liters of diesel that's been brought in to keep these truckers running, which they need, of course, to keep themselves warm. They've said that they're going to arrest anyone who brings, quote, material support, unquote. That could be fuel. It could also be food. But when the Ottawa police chief calls it a siege, it doesn't quite align with the photos you see of children playing on bouncy castles, of people singing, of worship services. So there are very much two dueling narratives at play here. But law enforcement has very much ramped up its efforts in the last 24 hours and still as we speak.
Andrew, is it possible to talk about the level of public support for the truckers? Can we turn to point to poll evidence that suggests the Canadian public's behind them or against them? What do you know?
Certainly when the convoy was on its way to Ottawa, we were seeing a large base of support that was growing by the day. There have been a couple of people that you've seen that now that they've stayed in Ottawa and the protest has continued and the honking has continued, a couple of people have said, okay, you made your point, you need to go home. But generally speaking, I'm still seeing outside of the downtown Ottawa bubble a tremendous amount of support here. Haven't seen any recent polling that could put a scientific measurement commitment to it. But what I do know is that the government is declining in the confidence that the public is holding in it. The police are looking worse by the day, because even among those who don't like the protest, they're seeing no action by the government to deal with it. So there is this state of limbo that's at play right now, but I do think the support has been held.
Lawton, good to talk to you as ever and appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. Lynn May alongside me, listening to what Andrew had to say there. There's a separate question about GoFundMe. We've talked about that already. Maybe we'll get to talk about it again. But just on the point about the occupation of a capital city, 10 days, very peaceful, as Andrew makes clear. But if you're living cheek by jowl with these great juggernauts, occasionally, letting their horns off and all the rest of it, you probably want shuttered them at some point. Or at least you want to know when they're moving on.
I think it goes back to what you say. If there is a large support in that region for what they're doing and what they believe in, then they should be allowed to do that. It's peaceful. I haven't seen any violence at all. And again, if they've got the backing of the people, then they should be allowed to continue to do that.
Lynn, they've got the backing not just of people in Canada, but people internationally.
Massively.
A lot of, $9 million was sent into the GoFundMe crowdfunding website, and they announced at the weekend, actually, that because the terms of the agreement were breached, they said, by the truckers and some of what they stood for, they said, actually, we'll have the money and we will disperse it. We will disperse it to other people. I mean, they backtracked on that.
Yeah, I think it's completely wrong, and it just shows inconsistencies with GoFundMe. Like I said previously, I came under so much scrutiny and criticism for questioning where the money was going for Black Lives Matter. At no point did they ask where the money was going, and still, as said before, in Canada, UK and the USA, no one knows where that money for Black Lives Matter has gone. Even some of the leaders in Black Lives Matter has bought multiple properties. So if they're going...
You need to supply the word allegedly.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
But so if that's the case with the truckers, then GoFundMe should investigate where that money's gone.
Yeah. Well, it does seem, as we said earlier to a technology correspondent, people are at least exploring alternatives to GoFundMe. Let's reflect on another story. We'll do that with Lynn to start with. One of Britain's leading scientists has claimed that hundreds of thousands of people worldwide died as a consequence of the French president's inaccurate criticism of the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID jab. Professor John Bell said Emmanuel Macron damaged the reputation of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccination wrongly and at a critical time. The French president described the British jab as, you may remember this, quasi-effective in the over 65s. He also called into question the UK's decision to administer vaccine doses 12 weeks apart, claiming it could lead to more mutations in the virus. Well, according to Professor Bell, his words led to a much reduced take-up of the jab, especially in countries which did not have access to their own vaccination supplies, and ergo he's left with the view that it's cost thousands of lives. We're going to talk to the former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. Oh no, he's there. Sorry, Ben Habib, welcome. I didn't realise you were ready to talk to us. I'm glad you are. What should we make of what Professor Bell said?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Right from the start of this pandemic, we've had an extraordinary influence from politicians across the board, almost getting the science to suit their narrative rather than the science actually genuinely leading the narrative, which is what the politicians have always wanted us to believe. And President Macron, I think, has got to be one of the worst, because the French public are basically much more suspicious of vaccines anyway. But as far as I can see, his antipathy to the AstraZeneca vaccine was largely driven by his antipathy towards the United Kingdom and the fact that it was a British vaccine. It was championed as a British vaccine. We got it out earlier than they did, and as a result, we had a much better experience in 2021 than the European Union did. And I'm certain that that's what was driving Macron, a deep jealousy and antipathy towards the United Kingdom. But I would just say before I finish that I don't think Macron was alone in allowing the politics to, as it were, craft the scientific narrative to suit their own purpose. Our politicians were at it across the board on a number of different fronts, which we can discuss if you like. It was a sort of global, political drive to get the science to follow what the politicians wanted.
And it's worth reflecting, Ben Habib, that the United States has not approved, the US hasn't approved yet, the Oxford-AstraZeneca jab.
Well, you know, if you think about it, the average time from conception to market for any drug is 17 years. And we got AstraZeneca's vaccine out within, what was it, a year and a half or something, and all the other vaccines came out remarkably quickly. And so I think a lot of these were untested, and there were indemnities given to the various pharmaceutical companies in order to be able to produce them at the speed at which they did produce them. And there's bound to be a bit of reluctance, I think, of countries to take on other countries' vaccines if they've got their own, you know, home-built ones. But I mean, it's one thing not using the AstraZeneca virus. It's one thing not approving it. It's completely another to go on the front foot and attack it, which is effectively what France did, and to a lesser extent, Germany did the same thing with AstraZeneca. And I'm certain of the fact that it was born out of, you know, it was championed as a British vaccine. It came out faster than anything they'd produced in Europe. It was approved by the MHRA when the European Medical Agency was, you know, dragging its heels. It was actually a fantastic example of British research and development capability coming to the fore at a time when we really needed it. And I think that just got the French, and particularly Macron, into a bit of a tiz.
You've reminded us, actually, Ben Habib, we'll say thank you, but just that point you raised there about the European Medical Regulator closing for Christmas. You remember at the height of the winter surge and saying we're going to take a break. It was extraordinary.
Yeah.
Ben Habib, really good to talk to you. Thanks ever so much. After the break, raising tension in Ukraine, the cause most unlikely people to call for calm. I'll try and make sense of what that sentence means later on for you. But first, we'll have a look at the weather.
Hello again. Cloudy skies overnight will bring outbreaks of rain to Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, and act as a blanket for much of the country, particularly in the south, where it will be a mild night. A few cloud breaks are possible for central and southern parts of the UK, but even here, enough of a breeze to keep things stirred up and mild. Heavy rain pushes south across Scotland, arriving into southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England by dawn. 7 to 10 Celsius for much of England, Wales, central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, but for the north of Scotland, 2 to 5 Celsius. Colder here because the front has moved south, and colder, brighter weather follows for Central Belt northwards. And really through Tuesday, we're going to see further blustery showers for much of northern and western Scotland, those showers falling as snow above 300 or 400 metres. But for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England, it stays cloudy with some light outbreaks of rain on and off throughout the day. Further south again, dry with even some sunshine for the Midlands, East Anglia, southern counties of England, South Wales, 12 to 14 Celsius in places here. Staying breezy and cloudy across much of England and Wales overnight, then into the start of Wednesday. And as a result, it's going to be mild. Outbreaks of rain pushing through Wales into the Midlands. And to the north, well, clearer spells for northern England, for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but further blustery showers. And as we go through Wednesday, we're going to drag cold air in across the northern half of the UK from the west-northwest. The snow line then starts to sink lower, and as a result, we're even going to see some sleet and snow showers to low levels across the north of Scotland, but certainly snow accumulating over the West Highlands above 200 metres throughout Wednesday itself. Cloud and rain sinks south across England and Wales, with sunny spells following, and the rain tends to peter out by the afternoon as well. 12 Celsius in the south, feeling cold in the wind further north.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, yesterday, the first of 1,700 troops from America's 82nd Airborne Division began arriving in Poland. They are being sent there to beef up the defences of Eastern European allies, nervous about what Russia is up to on the borders of Ukraine. But there is opposition to that deployment. Take this tweet. We call on President Biden to de-escalate tensions and work for peace rather than prepare for war, sending thousands more US troops to Europe in response to Russia's threats against Ukraine only fans the flame of war. Well, from whom did these dire words of warning come? You saw it there. Former Secretary of State, perhaps, maybe a diplomatic guru like Henry Kissinger or Madeleine Albright. No, the warning comes from Ben & Jerry's, makers of occasionally delicious ice cream. What on earth are they up to? Well, let's make sense of it if we can. In Warsaw, Marek Matraszek is an analyst there. Marek, welcome to you. We'll come on to Ben & Jerry's if we have to, but let's start with I'm glad we can laugh about it. The deployment of American troops, but also within the last 2 or 3 hours, the announcement from Ben Wallace, our Secretary of State for Defence, that 350 British troops will be moving to Poland soon as well.
Yes, a very good to see you, Colin. A very important announcement today from the British government, reflecting really what has been a very dramatic increase in the intensity of UK-Polish contacts. The Poles are very pleased at the British government's performance over Ukraine. Britain actually having led the way, in fact, within NATO, or at least within European NATO, on the response to Putin's aggression or threatened aggression against Ukraine. We've seen significant arms shipments out of the UK into the Ukraine, and Poland seeing this as a signal that really on Ukrainian issues, and remember that for Poland, Ukraine is the independence of Ukraine is an existential issue, crucial also for Polish independence. They're looking now to the UK for greater support, and the visit of the Polish Minister of Defence, Mr. Błaszczak, today, and his very successful talks with Ben Wallace reflect that. As you say, Colin, 350 British troops announced as moving to Poland as additional support for primarily the border issue, but other activities as well.
Marek, under the Cameron regime here, there was, in fact, going back to Blair, there was a sort of an uptick in the nature of the Anglo-French defence relationship, and they were seen as our chief defence partners. I wonder if that's really still true anymore. There's quite a lot of bad blood between Paris and London, and for historical reasons, going back to World War II, obviously, it will feel to a lot of Brits like actually the Anglo-Polish defence relationship is the one that really matters for us now in Europe.
Well, what's very interesting, Colin, is as you know, in times of peace, it's very easy to speak nice words and to have platitudes amongst a lot of backslapping going on, as you say, in the typical the Blair Cameron years. But when the chips are down, when the crisis emerges, the natural, as it were, alliances of Europe go back to their default position. And what we see in the Ukraine crisis has actually generated is a revival not just of the Polish-UK relationship, but also a dramatic strength of the US-Poland relationship, and also the US-UK relationship. Great deal of coordination going on between the three powers. I was in Washington a couple of weeks ago, talking to some officials there, and they're putting a lot of store in the revived Poland-US relationship as well over the Ukraine. So, as I said, in times of crisis, you find out who your friends really are. And Poland is finding out right now that at the end of the day, it's the US and the UK that are coming to the table.
Marek Matraszek. Marek, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thanks very much. Lynn May's alongside me to reflect on another act, really, of breathtaking corporate arrogance, that people who make ice cream can feel they can dispense pearls of wisdom to an American president at a time of high diplomatic tension. What planet are they on exactly?
Ben & Jerry's just make and sell ice cream. And the tweet doesn't even seem reflective of them having the knowledge behind what is being dealt with here. Do they even know the obligations of America to NATO? If they did, they wouldn't have said that. So how does that even make sense? And even if they did, why are they getting involved in such a hard-lined approach? There's no balance, there's no anything. I don't even want to hear from them with regards to international relations. Make ice cream.
What's your favourite Ben & Jerry's ice cream?
I don't even eat it.
Brilliant. Lynn May, thanks very much indeed. Coming up next, we've got our regular debate. We are asking a different question. It's a pithy one, it's an important one too. Should Camilla be Queen? Got two guests with what may be opposing views on that one, and we've got your poll results to bring to you as well. About 2/3 of you say yes, of course she should. We'll bring you some emails as well on that subject. But first, we're going to bring the headlines with Polly.
Hello there, just after 5:30, I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom. And the top story today, the Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting has been accusing the Chancellor of playing political games with public health after the NHS recovery plan was delayed. The Prime Minister, however, says Number 10 and the Treasury are working together to tackle patient waiting lists in England. At a visit to the Kent Oncology Centre at Maidstone Hospital with the Chancellor, Boris Johnson said the NHS backlog is a government priority. The Health Secretary has been making comments today about the recent criticism of the Prime Minister's wife, Carrie Johnson, saying it's sexist, undignified and unfair. His statement follows the publication of extracts from Lord Ashcroft's new book, which accuses Mrs Johnson of influencing her husband's decision-making. Carrie Johnson has insisted she plays no role in government and has simply been targeted by enemies of her husband. The UK is sending an extra 350 soldiers to Poland amid continued tensions between Russia and Ukraine. They're being deployed on top of more than 100 Royal Engineers sent last year to help in the recent border dispute between Poland and Belarus. The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace said it's to show Britain and Poland stand side by side. And the Chinese tennis player Peng Shuai says reports she accused a high-ranking Chinese official of sexual assault are a huge misunderstanding. In November, a post on her social media feed claimed she was forced to have sex with the former Chinese Vice Premier Zhang Guoli. The post was later deleted. The former doubles world #1 now told the French newspaper L'Equipe, "I never said anyone sexually assaulted me in any way." Peng said she'd been unaware of the global concern for her safety and had deleted the post. Here, the Children's Commissioner says there's still a long way to go on children's mental health, with only a third of young people able to access treatment. Dame Rachel de Souza says some children are waiting too long to start treatment, and there are regional disparities on waiting lists. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. We'll have more from Brazier after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Over the weekend, the Queen announced she would like Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, to have the title of Queen Consort when the Prince of Wales becomes king. As an endorsement from the very top, Prince Charles described it as a deep honour for both him and his darling wife, as he put it. However, despite Camilla's recent rise in popularity, there are still some in the country that see her as a controversial figure who they blame for the end of the Prince's first marriage to the late Diana, Princess of Wales. So on today's debate, we are asking, quite simply, should we have Queen Camilla when the time comes? Joining me for that debate, the Royal and Entertainment reporter at the Sunday Mirror, that is Sarah Robertson, and the Royal broadcaster and commentator, Rafe Hedelmanku. Thanks both of you for joining us. I'm going to start, if I may, with a couple of emails. It's got people going this. Barbara says, adultery, ? Which century are we living in? Was Diana an angel? Who cares about this issue? Camilla is brilliant. Penelope, a contrary view, how quickly people forget, she says. Sarah, what do you say?
Well, I don't think people have forgotten. I think there are still a large amount of diehard Princess Diana fans who remember how she was treated in that marriage. You know, we heard Diana go on television say that there was 3 people in the marriage, one being Camilla, who was the other woman, as she referred to. And a poll today found that only 70% of Britons, 70% of Britons disagree with the Queen's plan to make Camilla the Queen Consort and to give her this name of Queen. When Camilla and Charles married, at the time, you know, the public were a little bit disapproving, as we know. But the reason why they accepted the marriage was that they thought Camilla was going to be known as Princess Consort. And they said, oh, it's not great, but we can handle that. Fair enough. Now she's going to be Queen. And so I think this is sort of sticking in the throats of Diana fans who feel it's I don't know, disloyal to Diana's memory. And I mean, Diana herself, you know, her greatest fear, well, one of her greatest fears was the thought of Camilla becoming Queen one day and taking that place that she may have had, you know, had Camilla not been involved in their marriage.
Rafe, just on the point about those die-hard fans, I remember when I was a royal correspondent, 1998, Kensington Palace Gardens, watching the historian, we've interviewed him here on a couple of occasions, David Starkey. He was led away from the live position where he was broadcasting, doing an interview, I think with the BBC, for his own safety by the police, because he dared to denigrate the memory of Diana, Princess of Wales. And there were literally some of those die-hard fans who were prepared to do him a harm, I think, had the police not intervened. But that's a long time ago, isn't it?
Well, yes, this is the point precisely. Sarah calls them, you know, die-hard Diana fans. I think they're deluded Diana fans, you know? It's time to move on. The poor woman has been dead for 25 years. If her children can accept Camilla, if her mother-in-law, the Queen, can accept it, why on earth are these people so obsessed about a woman they've probably never met, you know? It just goes back to that moment. You remember at the funeral, people were shrieking over the coffin of Diana as it passed by, when probably they hadn't even, you know, shed a tear over their great uncle or their grandmother dying. It's an absolutely irrational reaction people have, and I think it's quite sad and pathetic that 25 years on, people are obsessing about this. Camilla is such a wonderful consort and spouse to her husband. The Queen has seen this, her dedication to so many causes, from osteoporosis to rape to animal welfare. She has really done everything she can do to try to redeem herself in the public's eyes, if she needed to do that at all. No one can tell exactly what would have happened had Diana lived, but I'm pretty certain, that all of the troubles of the 90s would eventually have faded away, and there would have been an amicable relationship between Diana and her ex-husband and Camilla, and everything would have been settled. And unfortunately, she died at the peak of those troubles, and many people in the public simply just need to get over it.
Sarah, do we not owe it to the Queen, who has been such a faithful servant in her role as head of state for so many decades, do we not owe it to her to accede to her wish in this? She wants Camilla to be Queen Consort. She knows Camilla is good for her son. She clearly cares deeply about the institution she's served for 70 years. We owe it to the Queen.
You could say that we owe it to her, but this is the Queen's decision. Whatever we think, there's nothing's going to change it now. The decision has been made, whether we like it or not. I think what it is with Diana's fans is they just don't want to see Diana erased from history, and it feels that she has been sort of slowly edged out. And also, it was the way that Diana was treated at the time, at the end of the marriage. She lost her HRH title. The Queen stripped that of her, which meant that Diana would have had to have curtsied to her children. Obviously not Harry now, he doesn't have an HRH either. But, at the time, she would have had to curtsy to her ex-husband, curtsy to her children and other members of the royal family. She wasn't treated very well at the end of at that time, at the end of those days, or her days, shall I say. And so I think that's why for, those Diana fans, they still feel upset. They want to protect her memory. They want to protect her legacy. And the other gentleman who was saying about Diana's children, how they feel, and they've accepted Camilla. Well, publicly they have, but, I do hear other things as a royal reporter from inside, and so I have to tread very carefully here. But yes, publicly they may have done, but I'm sure privately there may be other feelings at play that we're not always privy to.
Rafe?
No, I think what we actually have to establish here also is that the Queen hasn't granted permission for Camilla to be Queen. What she's made is a statement about the official recognition of a title that is undoubtedly the rightful title of Camilla. Under the common law, feminists may not like it, but a wife takes the status of her husband. So in 2005, Camilla did become legally the Princess of Wales. For obvious political public relations reasons, she chose not to use it. But when her husband accedes to the throne, under the common law, she will legally become Queen Consort. What the Queen has said is that she wants to see Camilla crowned, and she wants her to be officially recognised as such. But let's not be in any mistake about this. Camilla will be the Queen Consort.
And Rafe, just on that point that Sarah makes there, that Diana was entering a world post the divorce, which should have put her in a very difficult position, curtsying to her former husband. Do you recognise that depiction?
Well, I'm sorry, there are established rules and protocols of the royal court and of the royal household. Daughters have to. The Queen Mother had to curtsy to her own daughter after it being the reverse. That's just the established protocol. And of course, Diana married into the firm is rather different than Meghan Markle, who had no idea about these things. But Diana came from an aristocratic family with deep associations with the royal family, and of course, would have understood all of that.
Sarah, when you say the royal family have sort of expunged the memory of Diana, there are memorials to her. Fairly recently, the two princes managed to sort of hide their differences at the unveiling of one. There are charities that bear her name. I'm not really sure what more the family could have done.
Yeah, well, that's obviously her children. And, Prince Harry in particular is passionate about keeping his mother's memory and the flame of her memory alive. And that's something he does very well, I feel. They don't want to see their mother extinguished from history. I think what I'm talking about is generally within the royal family, because, as I said, she'd had to have that. Had the HRH title stripped from her, so she was already being removed from the royal family before her death. I don't know if you can remember, well, obviously you can, Colin, because you covered it, the funeral at the time. The Queen didn't even want Diana to have a state funeral. She wanted to deal with Diana's death as privately, because what she was saying was Diana was a private citizen. And obviously there was this world outpouring of grief and love for Princess Diana that the royals.
Sarah, can we not cut? I know it's a rough trade, really, but can we not cut the Queen some slack at that time? I mean, she was clearly massively distraught. I mean, if millions of Britons were distraught about it, what about the people who knew and loved Diana? I mean, they clearly were, and it's at times like that. And I speak of somebody, you know, who's been through a loss myself fairly recently. That you fall back on the rules, that you fall back on the regulations, and the regulations said. It's not a state funeral. It's, you know, I can see why she did that. In the same way I can see why she stayed in Balmoral for a few days. Hang on, Rafe, let Sarah answer that. Sarah?
Well, I mean, she was obviously acting at that time, and it was a very different Queen at that time, and it was a different period of history, but it was a pivotal period in history where we saw society change. Before that, the royal family really had been very sort of removed from us. It was an us and them, and Diana broke that barrier. You know, she brought them into our lives, really, where we felt like we owned them. You know, Diana sort of opened the doors to the royal family. You know, we saw these emotions that she brought to the royal family. She gave a human face to the royal family. So the Queen was reacting in the traditional way she had been brought up. But obviously times have changed. She's changed with those times. But what she showed in that time in 1997, when Tony Blair, the then Prime Minister, spoke to her and says, "Ma'am, don't you think, you know, we should be having something more to celebrate Diana's life and legacy?" And she realised she had to move with the times. Just feels again that she's sort of slightly out of touch a little bit with public feeling. She thinks, oh, you know, we're going to make a queen. That's the tradition. That's the protocol. That's what we'll do. And the British people will just accept it because that's what will happen. They will just accept it. But what you do have is very loyal Diana fans who don't want to. And also, Camilla herself, she's not bothered about being Queen Consort. She was happy just to be Princess Consort. And
okay,
I like Camilla.
So just hold on. Rafe, do we know? Do we know what Camilla wants? I mean, Sarah's asserting that Camilla doesn't really care that much about being Queen. Do we know?
Well, anybody who knows Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, knows how down-to-earth she is. This is not something which she's really going to... She's not someone who stands on graces and all of that. But, of course, she knows that for Prince Charles it's very important. It's an act of recognition by the state of his wife, and it's her entitlement to receive. I just want to say a couple of things, though. Firstly, the Queen did not deny Diana a state funeral. Only... Prince Philip didn't get a state funeral. The Queen Mother didn't get a state funeral. State funerals are reserved for the sovereign alone and for certain people like Churchill and Wellington, great national heroes. So there was no snub to Diana on that front whatsoever. And the whole idea that she's being expunged from history is, I'm sorry, is quite frankly absurd. She's now part of that rare group of icons like Marilyn Monroe, James Dean. These people will live on forever, for decades if not centuries, because they were captured in their prime at the moment of death. And that's essentially, she's become larger than royalty. She's become a global icon.
Sarah, I don't want to turn the clock too much back to the events of '97, but they, as you say, for you, for many people, they were this great inflection point for society when this sort of buttoned-up people suddenly became very unbuttoned. There's a contrary view to that, isn't there, which is that half the country didn't watch the funeral actually on television, and some people felt that it was this weird collective nervous breakdown when, for instance, W.H. Smith said we wouldn't stock Private Eye because the front cover of the paper was deemed insufficiently respectful. It was a strange week.
Oh, God, it was absolutely... The whole country was in uproar during that time, but I just felt it was such a moment of history, like the zeitgeist, everything changed at that point with her death. And from that moment going forward, it's just seemed to have stuck, you know, that now we have these outpourings of grief when somebody dies, you know, who's famous, be it a singer or actor, and I think Diana sort of set the groundwork for that with her death. And the fact that we're still talking about her now, as you say, 25 years on, just shows, you know, her popularity still among people, not just in Britain, but around the world. People are fascinated by her. And so she's always going to have these loyal fans who want to protect her memory, want to protect her image, and want to look out for her and defend her as they see it against this other woman, as they paint Camilla.
Our thanks to Sarah Robertson and Rafe Hadel-Mancu. Some thoughts on that I'm sure you'll be keen to share. We've got the survey results for you. 2/3 of you say that you would like to see Camilla as Queen Consort in the fullness of time. Not the biggest sample, getting on for 2... Oh, hang on, you can have a look yourself. There you go. There it is. How big's the sample? Yeah, there you go. There's the proportions. Broad in line, actually, with what I think it's about 70%, 75% of the British public want to retain the monarchy, so it's not completely out of kilter with that. Just a couple of emails. Darryl says Camilla will be a wonderful Queen consort. Phil says, as the consort of the future king, of course she'll be Queen. The only people who think there might be a choice are the members of the Diana cult. Unkind, Ian. Lynn May has joined me to reflect briefly on that story before we tackle my favourite story of the day, which is about Britain's oldest pub. Did you hear what Sarah Robertson was saying there, that we've expunged Diana from the national consciousness? Not from yours.
I'm fairly balanced with this, actually. I do understand for people who were great fans of Diana and the controversy that surrounded Camilla, Diana and the Prince of Wales. And I just don't understand why she actually needs to be Queen. I think it will do massive amounts for our tourism, you know, King and Queen. When was the last time we had something like that? But I just don't see the point of it, to be honest with you. And I'm not a massive fan of Camilla. I don't dislike her, I'm just not a fan of her.
OK. We'll come back to that story, I'm sure, many times in the course of the next few years. A pub said to be the oldest in Britain has gone into administration after, wait for this, after 13 centuries. Ye Olde Fighting Cocks in St Albans, Hertfordshire, has survived wars, plagues and financial crises. Quite a few of those, I imagine, have to have been established in 793 AD. Can that really be true? Can that really be true? The business was damaged ruinously, it seems, when COVID hit and has been unable to thrive or indeed survive. Well, Christo Tafali is the owner of Ye Olde Fighting Cocks, and he's joining us from St Albans. A very warm welcome to you. It's such a shame. Why is it having to go?
Good evening, Colin. Thanks for having me. I think we're well documented already. The statement read the pandemic has just left not only us but the hospitality industry in tatters. That, coupled with sadly an inept government, has left good, excellent, historic, important businesses, and not only just those but normal businesses, in a terrible situation that you can nothing about. It could be better.
What's going to happen? What's going to happen to it, Christo?
Well, so at the moment I'm working very hard with the administrators. Very closely with the administrator, been on the phone all day. And let's just say my responsibility is currently to put the pub to bed in the best way possible to alleviate any disruption to, firstly, our customers, staff, the brewery, and just the pub itself. So I'm working very hard on that at the moment. If I can say, Colin, it's a very fluid situation. My responsibility has and always has put the pub first, and that hasn't changed today, even though I've had to call the administrators in. I still have responsibilities that we've got to put to bed and make sure we do this as well as possible. Luckily the phone's been ringing, so there's plenty to be dealing with at the moment.
OK, well, we wish you well with it, and do let us know what happens if it's a happy outcome, by which I mean it carries on in a pub. Christo Tafali.
We will carry on with the pub, thank you.
OK, thanks ever so much. Christo Tafali joining us there. Lynn May's alongside me, describing it as a fluid situation, as well he might, given that it's a pub. I enjoyed the gag. The truth is, I love the idea of pubs, and I love the idea of that place not being turned into another detached...
Please no.
But you've got to go, you've got to walk the walk, haven't you? You can't just keep saying pubs are great, but then not go to them. And I'm afraid I'm probably guilty of that.
I think it's really sad, and I actually wanted to ask Christo, because something similar happened in Tottenham, where I grew up. And there was a really historical pub there, and it was about to go into administration. And the people in the area actually banded together and invested in it, so now they all have shares. So I don't know if more can be done to work with the community and with the local authority, because it's historical. Like, Oliver Cromwell's attached to it, and, it's got a real history and culture attached to it.
I've got to tell you, I'm not sure Oliver Cromwell, as the man who banned Christmas and the famous Puritan, was much of a regular pub goer. I rather think not.
He stayed there.
But if you're watching it and do let us know. Was Oliver Cromwell a barfly? We think not. Lynn May, thanks so much. It's been great having you in the studio today. We hope to see you again. More's coming up.
Hello again. Cloudy skies overnight will bring outbreaks of rain to Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England and act as a blanket for much of the country, particularly in the south where it will be a mild night. A few cloud breaks are possible for central and southern parts of the UK, but even here, enough of a breeze to keep things stirred up and mild. Heavy rain pushes south across Scotland, arriving into southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England by dawn. 7 to 10 Celsius for much of England, Wales, central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, but for the north of Scotland, 2 to 5 Celsius. Colder here because the front has moved south, and colder, brighter weather follows for Central Belt northwards. And really through Tuesday, we're going to see further blustery showers for much of northern and western Scotland, those showers falling as snow above 300 or 400 metres. But for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England, it stays cloudy with some light outbreaks of rain on and off throughout the day. Further south again,